name is Danielle. I'm going to be facilitating today's webinar for how to use Labster in your Blackboard courses, how to share the simulations, how to access the various resources that we have available for yourselves and your students. We have quite a few attendees joining today's webinar, so I'm going to give it another minute or so, and then I'll go ahead and get started. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Danielle. I am from the customer success team here at Labster, and today I'm going to be going over with everyone how to add Labster simulations into your Blackboard courses. As you can see, there is an area for questions to be submitted, and I will do my best throughout the webinar to go through the questions, but I will also reserve time for the end of the webinar and I can go over questions at that point as well. A recording of this webinar will also be sent to all of the registrants for the webinar, so you can look out for that in your emails as well. All right, so to get started, again, I'm on the customer success team. First, I'm going to be I'll go ahead and start my presentation here. Here's an agenda of what to expect from today's webinar. First, I will go over just an overview of the integration process and what the onboarding process will look like from your point of view. Next, I will be doing a demonstration of how to import a simulation into your Blackboard courses. Next, I will go over support, so how students can reach out to support if they encounter any technical issues or have any questions. And then I'll go over best practices on using Labster. And then, as I mentioned, we can do a Q&A at the end of the webinar. All right, so here's a kind of a high-level overview of what to expect. Once you or your institution or your department has signed on to use Labster for the semester or for the year, you will then be introduced to one of our customer success managers here at Labster. Our roles is to ensure that you are set up for success, that you know how to use the platform, that you know how to use it as a tool in your platform, and if you are unsure, then we would be that contact for you to help you integrate it into your course. The next step, and I guess maybe the most important step, would be to make sure that Labster is integrated into your Blackboard instance. Without this integration, Labster and Blackboard will not work. So that's why we will work, or the customer success manager at Labster will work with your Blackboard IT staff or learning management system admin to complete the Blackboard and Labster integration. Once the integration is complete, instructors will have the ability to browse our entire simulation catalog and access all of our supplemental content and materials. And once you've browsed our content and you know which simulations you'd like to import into Labster, you can go ahead and add simulations. And then essentially at that point, you're live with using Labster once students start to work through the simulations. Right. This is an overview of some of us on the customer success team. You or the institution will be assigned to work with one of our customer success managers, and we will be kind of your guide to using Labster. We'll be there to help with troubleshooting, answering any questions, and essentially just making sure you're set up for success with using Labster in your courses. As I mentioned, the Labster Blackboard integration is essentially what allows Labster to integrate and allows the grades from Labster to populate automatically into Blackboard. And I will be going over all of that in a few minutes, how the grade syncing works, what the grades will look like for you and your students once they've completed the simulations. Okay. As I mentioned, once the integration is completed, you will be able to browse the catalog. And at this point, I'd like to kind of make this not necessarily a disclaimer, but just to make everyone aware. So for the first part of this webinar, I'm going to be going over the instructions on how to add the Labster simulations into Blackboard using our most up-to-date and recent LTI integration. Not every school has moved over to this integration yet. So far, a lot of institutions are still utilizing the older integration platform, which is LTI 1.1. I will go over that towards the end of the webinar as well, so I will cover that. But just so you are aware, what you're seeing here, this catalog, this is what users of the LTI 1.3 integration will see when they browse the catalog. If you're unsure of which integration your school is set up on, please feel free to reach out to your Labster customer success manager or the main point of contact at your institution who is responsible for signing on to use Labster. But most of we're working towards getting all of our schools moved over to Labster LTI 1.3 for the summertime. So even if you're not on this version currently, it wouldn't hurt. You can absolutely pay attention, and because at some point within the next handful of months, this LTI version will be available. Yep. So let's see. There's a question. So Daryl, I will reach out to you with screenshots and printed instructions for this LTI integration. So let me just make a note of that on my end. Alrighty. So as I mentioned, Blackboard, once the integration is complete, you'll be able to add the Labster simulations into your Blackboard course shells, which leads me to kind of demoing how this works. As I mentioned, I am going to demonstrate this for the Labster LTI version 1.3, which is the newest integration. And then I'll demo the same process, but for the older integration 1.1. All of these instructions are available on our Help Center website, help.labster.com. So if you search for Blackboard, you will see a list of articles, and there will be instructions for both LTI 1.1 and then LTI 1.3 and how to add the simulations into your courses. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and demo this out. Okay, great. So right now I'm logged into a Blackboard course. I'm going to go into the home page. So as I mentioned, first I'm going to go over how to add the simulations if you are in the most recent integration, LTI 1.3. And these instructions are available on our Help Center website. So the first thing that you will want to do once you know that Labster is integrated into Blackboard is you're going to go to your Blackboard course. You're going to navigate to the content section of your course. Right. You will go to build content, and on this drop-down menu here, you will see Labster. It's up to the LMS admin at your institution what the tool is named as, but we have instructed LMS administrators to title it either Labster LTI 1.3, Labster tool, but it will be the only Labster tool that populates in this content menu here. So you'll go ahead and select Labster from this drop-down menu. And I will say, out of all of the integrations we have done for LTI 1.3, the Blackboard steps are probably the most seamless and straightforward. As you can see, all I had to do was click into that menu item, and now I have the content picker. This is kind of the new view of selecting Labster content and browsing the catalog. So from here, this is not only where you can add simulations, but you can also just browse the catalog. You don't necessarily need to add simulations at this point. If there is a certain simulation you are interested in, you can go ahead and search for it. You scroll down. Oops. All of the options will populate. If I go ahead and simply just click into the simulation like this will open kind of a resource page. This is not visible to students, so they will not have access to all of this information. Of course, this is strictly from the instructor point of view. We have lab supplement materials here that are available to you as the instructor if you'd like to utilize them in your course. Most notably is the lab report and the lab manual. So feel free to utilize these in your courses as you see fit, but they are separate from the Labster simulation. They open in the form of a Google document. So keep that in mind. But from here, you as the instructor do have the ability to play the simulation if you kind of want to test it out before assigning it to your students. You can go ahead and click the play simulation button here and the simulation will launch in a new browser tab. And this is exactly how the students will be seeing it. So this is no different from what they will see on their end. Right. Going back into the Blackboard course, if I scroll down a bit, here is a screencast video of the simulation being played from start to finish. You can always refer to this if you'd like to just kind of skim through it. Maybe necessarily might not have the time to play the simulation. Oops. But you can go ahead and just kind of skim through the simulation to see what the students will be prompted with. All of our simulations have a different set or a different amount of multiple choice questions that they need to answer, and those will be presented here on the lab pad that the students are working off of. So the questions that the students answer from the simulation, all of those grades will then be calculated into a final grade, and that is what syncs over into Blackboard. But I will touch more upon that in a few minutes. If you scroll down here, we'll give you additional information about the simulation. So approximate length. Most of our simulations are 20 to 45 minutes long. However, we do have a handful of short length simulations that are about 10 to 15 minutes long. And they are derived from our full length simulations. And you will know that this is the case because it will say that the length is about 10 minutes. And in the About section, it will give you the disclaimer that this simulation is derived from a full-length simulation. From here, you'll be able to see if the simulation is available in accessibility mode and the various languages that the simulation is available to be played in. Right. So again, the way I got here is all I did was I was in my Blackboard course, I went to the content menu and then I selected Labster, and this is immediately what I'm seeing. Right. You'll see here the first item on the content picker window is the Labster dashboard. I would recommend that all instructors add this to your course. What this is essentially, if you've used Labster before, you'll know that the Labster dashboard is simply just a visibility tool. This will give you a deeper dive into your students' grades. You'll be able to see which questions they got right and wrong, and you'll be able to see how much time they've spent on the simulations as well. From the instructor view, you'll of course be able to see all of the students' grades and all of this information here. But from the student perspective, they will only be able to see their own grades. And from the dashboard is where they would alter or change the language. And if they would want to turn on accessibility mode, they would do so from the dashboard as well. So again, keep in mind, the students aren't going to see all of the students' grades. They'll only see their own grades. Right. So if you want to add the dashboard, which I would recommend doing, all you need to do is click the Add button here. Click Add to Course. And then you'll immediately see that the simulation populates under content, or it's not a simulation, it's the dashboard, but it's going to kind of look like a simulation. And if you click into it, it will launch in a window here. And this is what the new dashboard will look like. You'll be able to view all of the simulations that you have assigned to students, and you'll be able to see the list of all of the students, what their progress is, their score, and whether they have completed the simulation. Looks like we have a question here. If you perform a course copy in Blackboard, will last year's students be carried over, or will everything be reset based on the current year? So I believe that if you copy a course in Blackboard, I believe it will just be the course content that copies over, not necessarily the student roster that copies over. But I know that the simulations will indeed copy over. I would maybe follow up with your LMS admin just to confirm if students will also be carried over, but I don't believe that that is the case. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my Blackboard course. So let's say I've added the dashboard, but now I would like to add an actual simulation into my course here in Blackboard. To do that, again, I would just navigate to Content, Build Content, and then Labster from the dropdown. As you can see, I can narrow it down by subject, by education level, and also the language. If I'm looking for simulations specifically, in Spanish, I can do that. But let me just scroll down. I'll go ahead and add animal genetics into my course. And you'll see that it automatically populates under content. If I click into it, it will automatically launch for me. Students, again, are not going to see the lab supplements here. They will only have the play simulation button accessible to them, as well as the about section on the simulation. So you don't have to worry about students having access to these supplements here. All right, if I go into the animal genetics simulation and click edit, I can go ahead and alter the points possible. So maybe I don't want it to be out of 100 points. I want it to be out of 25, let's say. And if you want to assign a due date, you can go ahead and do that as well. Another question says, so when the course is copied over, I take it the instructor has to go into a Labster link and repair the Labster course with the new Blackboard course. So if you copy over your course from last semester and you already have simulations added into that course, if you copy it over, the simulations will continue to work. It will just be that the student roster doesn't get carried over, so it's kind of like the simulations are there from scratch for the new student roster to kind of take over and start playing through. I hope that answers your question. Following the webinar, if there are any other questions, I will include my email, or I will let you know my email, and then you can just reach out to me via email, and we can, go back on email and kind of get that resolved. So yeah, I will include my email at the end of this if there are any other additional questions. All right, great. So everything I just went over, again, this is for the new LTI 1.3 integration. The way that the grades will sync from the simulations is that once students complete the simulations to 100% completion, their best attempted grade will automatically sync into Blackboard. And there's nothing that you need to do to make that happen with the new integration. You will simply just need to make sure that students complete the entirety of the simulation. And as long as they do that, then the grades will populate into Blackboard. But like I said, if you do want to get a deeper dive into the students' grades, please feel free to utilize the Labster dashboard, as this will give you a deeper dive into your students' attempts. And you can kind of see if there are students who haven't completed the simulation. All right. So with that being said, I want to go over now if there are instructors who are on the old LTI 1.1 integration, I will go over those instructions now as well. And these instructions are also available on our Labster Help Center website. So you can always refer to those in addition to this webinar. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I have pulled up the faculty resources page This web page, we send this over to our customers. So if you don't have this web page, feel free to reach out to your Labster customer success manager and they can provide this to you. So this is where you would go if you are set up with the old LTI 1.1 integration. So the first thing you would do when you get to the faculty resources page is navigate to upload to LMS. Scroll down and click add simulations to your LMS. Once you click on that, a window will pop up, and from here you can go and pick and choose which simulations you'd like. Of course, it's taking its time now that I am on a webinar trying to demonstrate this. So there we go. So on this pop-up window, you'll go ahead and you can search for keywords, or if you know which simulation you'd like, you can search for it specifically. Let's go ahead and do animal genetics again. So I'm just going to click on the plus icon here. I'm going to click download, Blackboard, and then download common cartridge file. Once you do this, a zip folder will then get sent to your computer downloads, and just make sure that before you import this zip folder into Blackboard that it remains as a zipped folder. If your computer has settings where any zipped folder gets unzipped or decompressed, just make sure that you zip or compress the folder back before you import it into Blackboard. So once I have the zip folder here, I'm going to navigate into my Blackboard course, right? And unlike the previous integration, what I just went through where we go into build content, these steps are a little bit different. Now that I'm on my Blackboard course here, I'm going to go to packages and utilities under the control panel. And then I will select import package / view logs, right? On this page, sometimes it's a little bit hard to decipher to see the button, but there's going to be an import package button here. So you'll click into that. Okay. First, you're going to browse your computer and select the common cartridge folder that we just downloaded. Again, it's a zipped folder, and it will always start with CC _ if you ever need to search for it in your computer. Right. And then all you need to do is check off content areas. Right. Then you can go ahead and click submit. Right. As soon as the upload process is done, you can go into your course menu, and there will be a Labster simulation section, and any simulations that you've imported through that common cartridge will automatically import into your course here. As you can see, we use this for training purposes, so there are quite a few simulations here, but the animal genetics simulation went ahead and populated. Unlike the previous integration or the most up-to-date integration that we have, if you're using the older integration, there is an extra step that you need to take when importing the simulations. And this is very important. It is outlined in our instructions on the Help Center as well, so you can refer to those. So all you would need to do is edit the settings for the simulation. Right. The first thing you will see is enable evaluation is set at no. You want to make sure to click yes. If it's no, if you leave it as no, the grades will not populate into your Blackboard gradebook. And this is a limitation from the Blackboard side. So just keep that in mind that you will need to go into every simulation you import and change enable evaluation to yes. Otherwise, your students' grades will not populate over. If you do, accidentally forget to check it to yes, when students access the simulation, they will get a prompt when launching the simulation saying your professor does not have evaluation enabled. Please reach out to them, to get it enabled. So if you do get that messaging from your students, that just means that you need to set the enable evaluation as yes. Once you set it as yes, you can go ahead and set the points, put in a due date if you'd like to, and then scroll down, and you'll just need to make sure that the simulation opens in a new window. Right. Once you do that, you can hit submit, and then the simulation will be up to date. And that way, once students work through the simulation, their best attempt will automatically populate into the Blackboard gradebook. Another question, are we notified when this cartridge has been updated or a newer version is out? So when you import a common cartridge, you won't get a notification if the simulations are updated. You'll simply just need to go back and download a new common cartridge. We have actually, as of today, released brand new simulations. So you will have, if you, let's say last semester downloaded 10 simulations into your course, but you want to download some of these new simulations and add them into your course for this semester, you'll need to go in and download a new common cartridge containing those new simulations. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just click into one of the simulations. So when the students launch the simulation, they'll be on this loading screen. One of like a tip for students would be if it's on the loading screen, just make sure that they stay on the loading screen. If they keep going back and clicking in and out, it's going to just keep pausing the simulation upload. As you can see, I just clicked out. Now it's kind of stuck on this gray screen. So just make sure students stay on the loading screen once they launch it. The next tip or the next thing I wanted to go over is how students can reach out to our support team. You'll see here on the loading screen, there is this blue intercom chatbot. This is how students can reach out to our support team. Not only is this accessible from the simulation itself, so if I click into it, it's going to launch a tab here. It might not be opening up right now because it's still loading, but this support chat is also accessible from our support website. So I'm just going to go back into my presentation here and go over support and then best practices as well. So here are some do's and don'ts of using Labster. Yes, so there is a way. The question is there any way to exclude the voiceover? Yes, you can absolutely do that. Let me just cancel out of this. So let me go ahead. So when the simulation launches, on the lab pad that opens up, actually, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up a support article that outlines this. So there is a way not only to disable the voiceover, but you can also turn off, I believe, give me 1 second, let me just pull up. So when students are in the simulation and they want to turn off the voiceover, they simply just need to click on the little volume icon on their lab pad right here, and it will give them the option to turn off the voiceover. So by default, the voiceover will be turned on, but they can toggle it on and off just by clicking on the little volume icon here. The next question is the Labster simulations tab on Blackboard visible to my students? Can I move the simulations that I want them to view to another folder? Yes, you can absolutely move the simulations over to another folder. This is just kind of the folder that they by default populate into, and students do have access to it, but if you would prefer that they move over to another folder, you can just click on that move functionality and you can move it to a new destination folder in your course. All right. Alrighty, so in terms of best practices, the first best practice and probably the biggest one would just be make sure students are using Labster on either a laptop or desktop computer. If they're trying to launch Labster on their iPad or their iPhone, they will not be able to access the simulations. We just right now are not available on those devices. It is on the roadmap for the future, but right now we are only accessible from laptops or desktop computers. Next would be to make sure students utilize Labster with Firefox, which is our recommended browser, or Chrome. If students are launching Labster with either Safari or any other web browsers, they will encounter some loading issues. So just make sure they use Firefox or Chrome. Next thing would be just, if students have 10 tabs open at the same time that they're using Labster, make sure to close out of as many as they can. Obviously, the less tabs open, the better, and it will make the simulation upload faster. And as I mentioned earlier, when the simulation is loading, just make sure that it loads to 100% before clicking away elsewhere on the computer. Something I wanted to make mention of is throughout the simulation, there is a handful of checkpoints. So as long as the student reaches those checkpoints within the simulation, they can hit escape on their keyboard at any time, and it will kind of push them out of the simulation. So if they want to pick back up and resume at a later date or time, they can do so. Another question we have here is, how often does the grade sync happen? Hourly, question mark. If an instructor changes their mind and decides to drop the Labster activity, can we simply delete the Labster grade center column? If I delete a deployed Labster activity in Blackboard, will it delete the grade center column? So the Labster grades will sync into Blackboard automatically only if the student completes 100% of the simulation. So if you've added a Labster activity to your course, but none of the students have actually finished the entirety of it, there will be no grades in the gradebook. The grades will only populate once they've finished 100% of the simulation. So you could go ahead and delete the Labster grade center column if you kind of change your mind. But I guess if I delete a deployed Labster, as far as the last question, if I delete a deployed Labster activity in Blackboard, will it delete the grade center column? That's a great question. I want to say that it will. That is worth testing, though. I'm going to make a note of that, actually. Jonathan, I will reach out to you following the webinar, and I'll follow up with you on that. Okay, great. Thank you for these questions. They're really great. Alrighty, and these best practices are available on our Help Center website. If you search for this, if you search for just 101, the Labster 101 Getting Started with Labster article, I think is a really great article to share with your students. It includes best practices. Can my computer run with Labster? And then here's just a high-level overview of students